Welcome to session 6 of this seminar series looking at Israel, the Middle East and Bible prophecy. In this session we're to look at how the Romans were involved in fulfilling Bible prophecy that the land of Israel would be made desolate. A few days before Jesus was crucified, he predicted that a temple that Herod had built would be demolished. We read in Matthew 24 and verse 1, "Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, 'Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down.'" Now, to the Jews, this was unthinkable. The temple was the most important symbol of God being amongst his people. They wouldn't have believed its destruction was possible. But this was a few days before the Jewish feast of Passover, when the Jews celebrated the escape from Egypt as the first step on their journey to inhabit the land of Israel. It can be readily appreciated that such celebrations would provoke a nationalistic fervour in the land, and though disbelieving, the Jews were anxious to know more about Jesus' prediction. We have the incident recorded in Luke chapter 21. Jesus uses the opportunity to tell them of the time that would soon come when Roman armies would come against Jerusalem and destroy it. Luke 21 verse 20. "But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her." So Jesus plainly tells them that Jerusalem will be compassed about with armies. But his next words are surprising. He suggested that when the city is surrounded, that the people should flee out of it. How could they flee out of a surrounded city? What could he mean? We need to refer to a contemporary Jewish historian for a clue as to what Jesus meant. Josephus lived through the siege of Jerusalem in AD 66, and he tells us of the history of the siege. In AD 66, the Roman procurator of Jerusalem stole 17 talents of the sacred money from the temple. This inflamed the Jews and resulted in bloodshed in Jerusalem of both Romans and Jews. Jewish extremists successfully turned the situation into a full-scale revolt against Rome. The Roman legate of Syria, Cestius Gallus, marched south on Jerusalem with the 12th Legion and was soon laying siege to the city. The siege was successful and he took the outer city. He did not experience immediate success in taking the inner city, and, to quote the words of Josephus, he returned from the city without any reason in the world. Even though the city had been compassed about with armies, those who recalled the words of Jesus had opportunity to flee to the mountains. Later, the general Titus conquered much of the land of Israel and received news of troubles in Rome. This caused him to temporarily cease his campaign and provide a further opportunity for Jews to heed the words of Jesus and flee the city. A later historian records that 6,000 fled from the city. However, there were many who ignored the words of Jesus and chose to remain or even entered the city. Josephus records that the siege was so severe before it ended that those in the city were forced to eat their own children to avoid starvation. he records that over 2 million Jews perished. And this shows how few the 6,000 that listened to the words of Jesus were. Even then, there were few who took any notice of words that could have saved their lives. So too today, few listen to the words of Jesus recorded in the Bible that could save their lives, and this time eternally. So the city was taken against the command of Titus, but in fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy that the temple would be destroyed, the temple was burned to the ground. The Roman soldiers then set about dismantling the stonework of the temple so that they could get at the gold of the temple that had melted around the stones. So Jesus' prophecy that not one stone would be left upon another was fulfilled to the letter. The Wailing Wall, which can be seen in Jerusalem today, is not in fact a wall of the temple, but rather a retaining wall that provided the flat platform on which the temple was built. It's understandable that the Romans took every measure possible to prevent a repeat of the revolt of the people. They had learned to their cost of the fierce nationalistic pride of the Jews and how their vision of independence burned brightly. This was fueled by the promises made by God in their past. In order to minimize the risk of a repeat of the problems, the Romans arranged for the Jews that remained to be deported into the farthest reaches of the Roman Empire. Jesus also accurately predicted this. In Luke 21 and verse 24, he said, "And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." The political existence of the Jewish nation was annihilated, and the land soon became desolate. Jews were scattered to Asia, Africa, and Europe, where they continued their determination to retain their national identity. The scattering of the Jews into all the countries of the world had been predicted in the words of Moses over 1500 years earlier. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 62 to 64, it says this: "You shall be left few in number, whereas you were as the stars of heaven in multitude, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. And it shall be that just as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to nothing. And you shall be plucked from off the land which you go to possess. Then the Lord will scatter you among all peoples, from one end of the earth to the other, and there you shall serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, wood and stone." And so it was prophesied that in verse 62 their numbers would be decimated, in verse 63 that they would be taken away from the land, and in verse 64 that they would be scattered among nations from one end of the earth to the other. As we have seen, all these elements in the prophecy were precisely fulfilled at that time. The Jews were taken into the other nations by the hand of the Romans, and the land was gradually taken over by Bedouin tribes. The Romans were not completely successful in quelling all Jewish nationalism in the land, and in order to stop the activities of some small groups of zealots who were vainly attempting to restore some sort of Jewish rule, the Roman Emperor Hadrian ordered that the site of Jerusalem should be ploughed up and sowed with salt so that nothing would grow there. It would then be a lasting reminder to any Jews that did remain of the supremacy of Rome over the Jewish people. Although Deuteronomy 28 verses 62 to 64 showed what would happen to the Jews, a previous verse in the same prophecy clearly gives the reason why. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 58 says, "If you do not carefully observe all the words of this law that are written in this book, that you may fear this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God, then those curses that we read earlier would come to pass." The reason why Jerusalem fell was not the might of Rome over God's people, but rather the fact that God had decreed that his people should suffer the consequences of ignoring his commandments. The Jews are still a nation and are back in their land. The Romans have totally lost their identity. In fact, it wasn't long before barbarian tribes overran Rome, but the Jews survived. The land of Israel generally remained in an uncertain political position and was never again the seat of government. After Roman rule, it was taken by Arabs, the Turks, and subsequently was fought over by the Crusaders and the Muslims. And although it was taken out of Muslim rule for a short period of time, it soon returned to Muslim occupation, and until the First World War was dominated by the Ottoman Empire. During this time it became truly desolate, fulfilling another Old Testament prophecy. Leviticus 26 verse 43 says, "The land also shall be left empty by them, and will enjoy its Sabbaths while it lies desolate without them. They will accept their guilt, because they despised my judgments, and because their soul abhorred my statutes." The Sabbath was the Jewish day of rest, and in the law of Moses, this principle was applied to the land. There were years when the land was not to be cultivated, a form of crop rotation system. So it was that after the previous centuries of action in Jerusalem and the land of Israel around it, that the land had its rest in preparation for the events that should follow. So to summarize what we've looked at in this session, we've seen that Jesus warned the people of the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in AD 70. He also told them what to do to escape the destruction that was coming on the city, although few listened. The Romans came and took the city. But there were inexplicable breaks in the Roman siege, giving the opportunities for the people to escape that Jesus had foretold. We've seen that eventually Jerusalem was ploughed as a field, and the Jews were scattered into all nations of the earth. But although being scattered, the Jews have miraculously retained their national identity. Since that time, the land has generally been under Muslim domination. And finally, as demonstrated previously in this series, Bible prophecies can be relied on and always come to pass. Thanks for watching, and please look out for the next in the series, where we will look at the modern day miracle that has seen the nation of Israel re-established.
Click on the links to view the next video in the series, or to view the other videos in this series. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to our channel and you'll receive details of further videos that will help you in your Bible study. The notes that accompany the series can be accessed from our website.